Malignant. Ever wonder what lurks in the dark corners of your own mind? Madison's reality crumbles when she discovers those brutal murder visions aren't nightmares. She's the one doing the killing. Meet Gabriel, her parasitic twin brother, surgically removed as a child but never truly gone. His malformed consciousness has been sleeping in the back of her skull for decades, and now he's awake and furious. The nightmare isn't just Gabriel's twisted appearance when Madison's body contorts backward, spine bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. It's realizing every breath she's ever taken has been shared with this resentful presence. Gabriel doesn't just possess her, he is her, literally woven into her flesh and bone since birth. James Wan created something beyond typical possession horror. This isn't some external demon you can exorcise. Gabriel is family. He's blood. And as he reminds Madison with chilling certainty, she can never truly lock him away because doing so means destroying herself. Their relationship becomes a permanent psychological prison where the monster isn't coming from outside. It's been living inside all along, waiting patiently for its moment to settle old scores. Tusk. Picture the loneliest man alive, holed up in the Canadian wilderness with the perfect plan to transform humans into walruses. Not through magic or sci-fi nonsense, but methodical surgical reconstruction that's disturbingly plausible. Wallace thinks he's just interviewing an eccentric old-timer for his podcast. Instead, he becomes Howard Howe's latest project in recreating a relationship with the walrus that supposedly saved his life decades ago. The transformation process is methodical torture. Legs get fused together, arms bound and reshaped, tusks surgically implanted while consciousness remains trapped inside. What makes this genuinely disturbing? Howe isn't some supernatural monster, he's heartbreakingly human. His isolation has twisted grief into something monstrous, turning loneliness into a weapon. The walrus suit becomes a prison of flesh and bone. Wallace's mind stays intact while his body stops responding to human will. Kevin Smith crafted body horror that forces uncomfortable laughter at something deeply wrong. Those final scenes where Wallace can only communicate through walrus sounds represent complete psychological annihilation. The man is gone. Only the creature remains, imprisoned forever in its grotesque new form, conscious but unable to escape the nightmare of its own body. Antrum. What if simply watching a movie could kill you? That's the terrifying premise behind Antrum, marketed as the deadliest film ever made. This supposedly cursed 1970s Russian film gets blamed for dozens of deaths, theater fires, projection booth accidents, mysterious suicides, unexplained heart attacks among viewers. The meta-horror begins before you even press play. But here's the genuinely unsettling twist. Antrum isn't actually from the 70s, it's a 2018 creation masquerading as found footage, telling the story of two siblings digging a hole straight to hell to save their dead dog's soul. The fake film contains subliminal imagery, occult symbols, and disturbing visuals designed to unsettle you subconsciously. What makes this particularly effective isn't the surface story about demonic encounters. It's the psychological manipulation of presenting fiction as deadly reality, making viewers complicit in their own fear by suggesting that watching puts them at genuine risk. The urban legend becomes self-perpetuating. Every unexplained death gets attributed to the curse, feeding mythology that transforms entertainment into something genuinely menacing. You know it's fake, but that drumbeat of dread keeps pounding anyway. Saint Ange. The Maison Saint-Ange orphanage closed in 1958, but some children never left. Anna arrives as the new housekeeper to shut down the facility, bringing young Judith, a girl who hasn't spoken since witnessing her family's murder. What they discover transcends typical ghost stories. The building exists in multiple time periods simultaneously, with long-dead children's voices echoing through rooms that shift between past and present. Pascal Laugier crafted supernatural horror, focused on emotional trauma rather than cheap scares. These children aren't malevolent spirits seeking revenge. They're lost souls who never received the love they desperately needed in life. Anna becomes their surrogate mother figure, drawn into their world as they wait decades for someone to acknowledge their pain. The horror emerges gradually as the boundary between life and death becomes permeable in this place of institutional neglect. Children's voices call from empty rooms, toys move independently, and time itself grows unreliable as past tragedies bleed into present reality. What makes Saint-Ange genuinely unsettling is its exploration of how childhood trauma can literally haunt a place, with the orphanage serving as a physical manifestation of abandonment and loss that refuses to be forgotten, healed, or laid to rest. Dredge. What begins as a peaceful fishing simulator transforms into cosmic nightmare when darkness falls. You're a fisherman encountering increasingly Lovecraftian creatures in an open-world archipelago. Daylight hours feel safe, catching normal fish, selling your haul, upgrading equipment. But nightfall changes everything, revealing waters hiding something far more sinister. The fish you catch become mutated and grotesque. Extra eyes, human-like teeth, armored scales, glowing appendages, bloated, slimy bodies that shouldn't exist in earthly waters. Horror builds through environmental storytelling. Abandoned shipwrecks hide dark secrets. Island residents whisper about things best forgotten. And your equipment starts dredging up items that defy sane reality. What makes Dredge particularly effective is how it subverts the cozy fishing genre. Relaxing daytime mechanics become sources of dread after sunset, when your boat's lights attract things that shouldn't swim in any recognizable ocean. Cosmic horror emerges slowly. Strange lights in the distance, nets coming up empty despite something clearly pulling the line, and the growing realization you're not the apex predator here. Every deep water trip becomes a question of whether you'll return with sanity intact, or if the abyss will finally claim what it's been patiently hunting. The Begotten, Elias Merheige, created something that defies easy categorization, a silent, black and white nightmare that functions more as fever dream than conventional narrative. The film opens with a robed figure disemboweling himself, giving birth to a convulsing humanoid creature that represents some twisted version of divine creation. What follows is 78 minutes of surreal, often incomprehensible imagery that feels like watching someone else's religious psychosis. Bodies writhe in primordial landscapes, figures engage in ritualistic violence, and the line between birth and death becomes meaninglessly blurred. The horror comes not from traditional scares, but from the film's ability to tap into primal, pre-rational fears about existence itself. Every frame looks like a photograph from humanity's collective unconscious. Disturbing not because we understand what's happening, but because something deep within us recognizes these images as fundamentally wrong. Merheige used experimental photographic techniques that make human forms look simultaneously ancient and alien. The lack of dialogue forces viewers to confront pure visual horror without the comfort of explanation or context. It's biblical horror filtered through avant-garde sensibilities, creating something that feels both deeply sacred and profoundly blasphemous. The Begotten doesn't tell a story so much as inflict an experience, one that lingers in the subconscious long after viewing. The house in Fata Morgana, Gothic mansions have housed countless horror stories, but none explored suffering across time like this visual novel. The house exists outside normal temporal flow, trapping souls in tragedy cycles repeating across centuries with slight variations. You awaken in the mansion with no memory, guided by a mysterious maid through different time periods, witnessing the same characters playing out variations of fundamental tragedy. Each era, medieval, Renaissance, Victorian, modern, presents different incarnations of love, betrayal, and death, but emotional patterns remain constant. What makes Fata Morgana genuinely disturbing is exploring how suffering might be eternal, how trauma becomes so fundamental to existence that souls are doomed to repeat it endlessly in different forms. Characters aren't just ghosts, they're trapped in psychological loops transcending death itself. Love becomes obsession, devotion turns to possession, good intentions inevitably lead to catastrophic consequences. The house serves as both setting and character, a physical manifestation of how trauma transforms spaces into prisons. You gradually discover your own connection to the mansion's history, realizing you're not just observing these tragedies, but participating in them. The horror comes from understanding some wounds create their own reality. That pain can become so central to identity that healing becomes impossible. The Battery. Zombie apocalypse stories usually focus on action and survival tactics, but The Battery strips away familiar elements to examine what happens to friendship when civilization collapses. Ben and Mickey are former baseball teammates surviving in rural New England, but their different approaches to the undead crisis threaten to destroy their relationship completely. Ben adapts by embracing violence and emotional numbness, while Mickey clings to hope and humanity, desperately maintaining radio contact with other survivors. The real horror isn't zombies. They're mostly background threats. It's watching two friends slowly realize they're becoming different people, that the apocalypse is transforming them in potentially irreversible ways. Ben discovers he enjoys killing zombies, that violence provides clarity and purpose his pre-apocalypse life lacked. Mickey becomes increasingly desperate for human connection, to the point where his companionship needs begin compromising their safety. Shot with minimal budget in rural Connecticut, it focuses on character development over gore or action. The Battery refers to baseball's pitcher-catcher partnership, but also represents emotional and psychological battery that survival inflicts on human relationships. The true horror? Realizing that even if they survive the zombie apocalypse, their friendship might not survive the people they've become.
Subscribe for more interesting stuff. Tell us your experience in the comments.